December 7th, 1941. 7:48 a.m. Clears throat, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. It is a perfect tropical Sunday morning. The air is warm, smelling of saltwater and hibiscus. The sky is a flawless, impossible blue. Along the eastern edge of Ford Island, the titans of the U.S. Pacific Fleet are asleep. 7 battleships moored side by side in the shallow, oily water of Battleship Row. They are monuments of steel and arrogance. The USS Arizona, the USS Tennessee, the USS Maryland, and moored outboard of the Tennessee is the USS West Virginia, a 33,000-ton behemoth, a fortress of the sea. Deep within its steel belly, 22-year-old Doris Dory Miller is collecting laundry. He is a mess attendant, 3rd class. His battle station, if the ship ever goes to war, is in the magazine below the waterline. His job to pass ammunition up to the real fighters. What Miller does not know, what no one knows, is that 4,000 YD away, a Japanese B-5N Kate torpedo bomber is lining up its run, screaming in at just 40 FT above the water. Slung beneath it is a Type 91 torpedo and 1-800 LB cylinder of steel, explosives, and genius. Dory Miller is not a gunner. He is not a naval officer. He is not a strategist. He is a ship's cook. And in the next 10 minutes, he is about to do something so impossible, so forbidden, that it will shatter the very rules of the United States Navy and change naval history forever. To understand what happened on that bloody Sunday, you must first understand the man who planned it. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the commander-in-chief of Japan's combined fleet. Yamamoto was a gambler, a man who understood America better than America understood itself. He had studied at Harvard. He had been a naval attaché in Washington, D.C. And he knew one terrible truth. In a long war, Japan could not win. America's industrial might was a sleeping giant. If that giant ever woke up, it would crush Japan. Yamamoto's entire strategy was based on one insane gamble. Not to win a long war, but to win the entire war. In a single morning, he proposed a plan so audacious, so suicidal, that his own naval general staff called it insane. A 4,000-mile radio-silent journey across the hostile North Pacific. A secret armada of 6 aircraft carriers. The Kido Bai to launch a surprise attack and annihilate the U.S. Pacific Fleet in one devastating blow. But there was one massive, impossible problem. It wasn't the 4,000-mile journey. It wasn't the risk of discovery. It was the water. This is where expert consensus failed the Allies. The U.S. Naval Command in Hawaii was complacent. Why? Because Pearl Harbor is on average only 40 FT deep. 40 FT a torpedo dropped from an aircraft in 1941 needed at least 75, often 100 FT of water to plunge, stabilize, and arm itself. In a 40 FT harbor, a standard torpedo would simply dive straight into the mud. Pearl Harbor, the experts declared, was torpedo-proof. They had not accounted for Japanese genius. For months, Japanese engineers had worked in secret on an impossible problem. They created this, the Type 91 Revision 2 torpedo. It was a masterpiece of death. They attached small wooden fins, wooden to the tail, a simple $10 stupid trick. These fins would break off on impact with the water, but not before they stabilized the torpedo's angle. They added a second gyroscopic control system. The result, a torpedo that could arm and run in just 33 FT of water. A weapon built specifically to kill the ships in Pearl Harbor. The experts in Washington and London were focused on the Philippines, on Malaya. The experts on Battleship Row were preparing for a lazy Sunday. The experts had declared the harbor safe. And at 6 a.m. on December 7th, the Kido Bai turned into the wind. 353 aircraft, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and 0 fighters lifted off the decks. The first wave, 183 planes pointed their noses toward the impossible target at the exact same moment those planes were taking off. Dory Miller was waking up. His day started at 6 a.m. His first duty, serve breakfast in the officers' mess. To understand what Dory Miller did, you must first understand what he was not allowed to do. You must understand the U.S. Navy of 1941. It was a white man's Navy, and it had a massive systemic and brutal problem. Dory Miller was born in Waco, Texas, in 1919. The son of a sharecropper, he was 6'3", $200 eep. A powerful natural athlete, he was the star fullback on his high school football team. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1939 to see the world, to find a better life. But for a black man in 1939, there was only one life. In the 1942 U.S. Navy, black sailors were not sailors. They were not allowed to be by official written policy. They were restricted to one rating, mess attendant or steward's mate. Their official duties to cook the food, to wash the dishes, to serve the white officers their meals, to clean their quarters, to polish their shoes, to make their beds. They were in effect floating valet. They were forbidden by law from combat roles. They were forbidden from training on weapons. They were forbidden from becoming gunners or mechanics or navigators. Let me be absolutely clear. The expert consensus of the U.S. Navy, the admirals, the architects, was that men like Dory Miller were incapable of combat, that they didn't have the intelligence, the courage, the aptitude. They were not trusted to hold a weapon. They were literally the guys who made breakfast and the men on the USS West Virginia. They knew Dory Miller. They didn't just know him as the quiet man who served their coffee. They knew him as the ship's heavyweight boxing champion. In the brutal bare-knuckle smokers held on the deck, Miller had defeated every man who challenged him. He was a warrior forced to be a valet. He was a gun wrapped in an apron. A man with the heart of a lion who was only allowed to collect laundry. This was the man who was about to collide with Yamamoto's grand impossible plan. 7:48 a.m., Dory Miller is below decks. Some reports say he was in the laundry, others in the galley. It doesn't matter. What matters is that he is deep inside the ship, 4 decks down, surrounded by steel, near the waterline. He is by every definition in a trap on the bridge high above him. The officer of the deck, a young ensign, sees something. A plane. Strange. It's not one of theirs. He looks closer. He sees the red circle on the wing, the meatball. He screams for the general alarm. It is too late. The first wave of torpedo bombers is already here. They are not high-level bombers. They are coming in low, fast, suicidally close. The Japanese pilots, the best in the world, can see the faces of the sailors on the decks. They are aiming specifically for the battleships aboard the USS West Virginia. The first klaxons blare. Sailors are running, confused. Some are still in their pajamas. There is no time. There is no time. Dory Miller hears the alarm. He starts moving toward his battle station, the ammunition magazine. Deep in the ship's belly. 7:51 a.m. The first Type 91 torpedo, the one with the wooden fins, slams into the West Virginia's port side. The explosion is catastrophic. It tears a 20th hole in the hull. Instantly, thousands of tons of harbor water, black with oil and filth, begin to flood the lower decks. Before the ship can even react, a second torpedo hits, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. The 6th torpedo hits. This one is different. It slams into the ship's rudder. It disables the steering. It is a killing blow. In less than 2 minutes, the USS West Virginia has been hit by at least 7 torpedoes. It is a death sentence. Down below where Dory Miller is, it is pure black, screaming hell. The force of the explosions throws him against a bulkhead. The lights are gone. There is only darkness. And the sound of an entire ocean rushing in. The ship, his ship, begins to lurch. It is capsizing. It is dying. All around him, men are trapped, drowning in the dark. The ammunition magazine he was running to, it's already underwater. His official battle station is gone. He is in a flooded, lightless steel tomb that is rapidly rolling over. The experts are dead. The system is in flames. The forbidden cook is on his own. Dory Miller is a cook. He is not a damage control specialist, but he is also a survivor. He fights his way in the pitch black against the surge of water, against the tilt of the ship. He knows these passageways better than anyone. He cleans them. He moves by touch and by memory up. He has to go up. He breaks out onto the main deck and into a nightmare. The sky is black, not with clouds, but with planes. The air is not air. It is a screaming 2,000-degree inferno of smoke, cordite, and aviation fuel. Men are on fire. Men are jumping from the decks. The water itself is on fire. The USS Arizona, moored just behind them, has just exploded. A 1-million-pound bomb has detonated its forward magazine. The explosion, a fireball 500 FT high, lifts the 33,000-ton Arizona out of the water. The shock wave hits the West Virginia like the fist of God. It knocks Dory Miller flat. He looks around. Chaos. The ship's anti-aircraft guns are silent. Why? Why is no one shooting back? The Japanese planes are not just dropping torpedoes. They are now strafing the decks. They're 7mm machine guns are tearing the crew, the experts to pieces. The trained gunners, the men who were allowed to use the weapons, are dead. They are slumped over their 50 caliber mounts, their bodies shredded. The untrained men, the cooks, the musicians, the officers are running for cover. The sound is not a pop, pop, pop. It is a deafening, bone-shattering roar. A 50 caliber round is a monster. It is the size of a man's thumb. It exits the barrel at nearly 3,000 FT per second. It is designed to rip aircraft engines out of the sky. And Dory Miller, the ship's heavyweight boxing champion, is holding 2 of them. He doesn't know about leading a target. He doesn't know about ballistic drop. He knows instinct. He knows how to point. And he points it at the sky. At the swarms of Japanese planes, the dive bombers of the second wave, now screaming down to finish what the torpedoes started. He points the barrel, and he unleashes hell. He doesn't fire in short, controlled bursts like the experts would tell you to. He holds the triggers down. He creates a wall of fire, a 1,600 round per minute stream of tracers, incendiaries, and armor-piercing slugs. He is not aiming. He is erasing. He is drawing a line of steel in the sky and telling the Japanese planes, "You cannot pass." The other officers, the men on the bridge, they look down and they cannot believe what they are seeing. It is the cook, the mess attendant, the man who was forbidden from combat, who is now fighting the most effective, the only anti-aircraft defense on the entire dying battleship. The Japanese pilots see it too. They are used to silent, undefended targets. They are not used to a single furious, non-stop volcano of 50 caliber fire erupting from the deck of a ship that should already be at the bottom of the sea. They begin to avoid his firing arc. His gun, the cook's gun, has become the single most dangerous piece of real estate on Battleship Row. He fires, and he fires, and he fires for 15 minutes. 15 straight minutes under constant strafing as bombs explode around him as his ship lists sinking beneath his feet. He does not flinch. He does not stop. He does not run for cover. He just fires. He keeps firing until the ammunition belts run dry. He keeps firing until the water lapping at the deck is so high it threatens to swamp his position. He keeps firing until the last plane in the sky is gone. He keeps firing until the only sound left is the hiss of fire and the groans of his dying ship. Then silence. The attack is over. The sky is empty. Dory Miller lets go of the handles. His arms are numb. His ears are ringing. He is covered in sweat, oil, and cordite. He looks around. The battle is over. But the West Virginia's fight for life has just been lost. The ship is finished. It has taken in total 7 torpedoes, more than any other ship that day. It has taken 2 massive armor-piercing bombs. The port side of the ship is a mangled, flooded wreck. The ship is listing 28 degrees. It is sinking fast. The abandoned ship order is finally given. The West Virginia. This 33,000-ton fortress is not a ship anymore. It is a tomb. It is settling rapidly into the 40 ft deep mud of the harbor. It is not capsizing like the USS Oklahoma, only because the USS Tennessee is moored inboard, holding it partially upright. Dory Miller, his forbidden act complete, is now just a sailor again. He helps his shipmates. He pulls wounded men from the wreckage. He directs men, dazed and bleeding, toward the lines being thrown from the Tennessee. He helps stretch a plank between the 2 massive ships. He and the other survivors walk from their sinking battleship onto the deck of the Tennessee Sea. He is one of the last men to leave. He looks back. His home, the ship where he had boxed and cooked and collected laundry, is gone. It is a burning, smoking, half-submerged hulk. The water around it is a lake of fire, and inside it, still trapped in the flooded lower decks, are 106 of his shipmates. 106 men who would never see the sun again, including the man he tried to save, Captain Emvin Benyon, who bled to death at his post on the bridge. The ship is sinking. The crew is being slaughtered. The experts have failed. The system has collapsed. And in this moment, Dory Miller sees a problem. Not the planes, not the sinking ship. He sees the captain, Captain Emvin Benyon. He is lying on the bridge, his body mangled. A piece of shrapnel from the Arizona's explosion. He has ripped open his stomach. He is dying, and he is still trying to command his ship. He refuses to leave. The ship's executive officer, a man named Johnson, runs to Miller. He doesn't see a cook. He just sees a 200 LLB man, a strong man. "Help me move the captain," he screams. The bridge is exposed. The air is thick with bullets. This is suicide. Dory Miller does not hesitate. He and Officer Johnson run into the fire. They grab their dying captain. Benyon is in agony, but he is still conscious. "Leave me," he orders. "I'm done for." Miller ignores him. He is the ship's heavyweight champion. He gently lifts the captain, a man he had probably served coffee to just that morning, and he carries him. He carries him out of the fire to a place of relative safety. He has done his duty. He has saved his captain from the flames. He could have stopped. No one would have blamed him. He could have found a life raft. He could have jumped overboard. He was, after all, just a cook. But Dory Miller is not done. He has saved his captain. But the planes are still coming. They are still strafing, still killing his shipmates, and the guns are still silent. He looks at the burning sky. He looks at the dead gunners, and he looks at the guns. 2 50 caliber Browning anti-aircraft machine guns mounted on the deck, silent, waiting. A weapon he has been forbidden to touch. A machine he has never been trained to fire. A role. His experts told him he was unfit to perform. He looks at the gun. He runs. He runs past the dead gunners. He leaps over the twisted steel, and he gets behind the twin-mounted 50 caliber Browning machine guns, a weapon system weighing over 130 lb. A complex belt-fed air-cooled machine designed to fire 800 rounds per minute. A weapon we must remember he had never been trained on. He is not a gunner. He has no idea how to load it. He has no idea how to aim it. He just knows it needs to fire. A young officer, Anson Fred White, is nearby. He sees Miller. He doesn't see a cook. He sees a strong pair of hands. "Can you fire that thing?" White yells over the roar. Miller is honest. "No, sir, but I can learn." White yells back. "I'll load it." "You fire it." This is the moment the expert system breaks. The rules are gone. The policy is in flames. There are no more cooks and gunners. There are only the living and the dead. White and another sailor, they managed to get the ammunition belts feeding into the guns. Miller grips the spade handles. He pulls the trigger, and for the first time, the USS West Virginia fires back. The attack on Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto's impossible gamble, is over. In just 90 minutes, the Japanese have won. It is the greatest, most devastating naval victory in modern history. 243 Americans are dead. 178 are wounded. 18 ships, including all 7 battleships on Battleship Row, are sunk or crippled. The USS Pacific Fleet, the sleeping giant, has been decapitated in its bed. The experts in Washington are in shock. The experts at Pearl Harbor are in ruins. The system, the plan, the expert consensus that declared Pearl Harbor safe has failed completely. And in the middle of this catastrophic failure, in the middle of this national nightmare, a new problem is brewing. A story, a legend, the story of the cook who manned a gun. In the chaotic days after the attack, as the smoke clears, as the Navy tries to understand what just happened, reports begin to flood in. Survivors of the West Virginia, the officers, the sailors, are all telling the same impossible story, the story of Dory Miller. They talk about how he saved the captain. They talk about how he, a mess attendant, with no training, fired a .50 caliber machine gun. And they talk about the planes, the Japanese planes that he shot down. How many? The reports are frantic. Some say they saw him hit 2. Others swear it was 4. Some claimed it was as many as 6. We will never know the exact number. The chaos of that morning, the smoke, the fire, the 1,600 rounds per minute made it impossible to confirm. But the U.S. Navy, in its official after-action report, would later state in black and white that Dory Miller fired the gun with marked efficiency and is credited with shooting down at least 2 and possibly as many as 6 enemy aircraft. Let's be clear, even 1 plane is a miracle. Trained gunners on a good day with a stable platform would be lucky to hit 1. A cook on a sinking ship under constant fire. Hitting any is not just improbable, it is impossible. And now, the United States Navy, the same organization that told Miller he was only fit to serve coffee, had a massive political and public relations problem. What do you do with a hero who was never supposed to be one? What do you do when your greatest hero from your greatest defeat is the one man your entire system was designed to ignore? The Navy, the experts, the admirals faced a choice. This was a war for hearts and minds. America was broken, defeated, humiliated. The public was desperate for a hero, for one good story from a day of total disaster. And the Navy had one. The problem? He was black in a segregated racist America at war. The story of Dory Miller was not a story. It was a bomb. The expert consensus of 1941, the political, the military, was that you could not, you must not tell the American public that a black man, a cook, was the hero of Pearl Harbor. It would shatter the system. It would upend the social order. It would, they argued, destroy the morale of the white troops. And so the experts made a decision. The same experts who declared Pearl Harbor safe. They decided to bury the story. They decided to make Dory Miller disappear. The first initial reports praised an unnamed sailor, a Negro messman whose bravery was noted, but whose identity was kept a secret. For months, the Navy refused to name him. They praised the heroes. They listed the dead, but Dory Miller, the man who actually fought back, was erased. He was a forbidden hero. His act was too insane, too impossible for the experts to handle. They thought they could control the narrative. They thought they could just move on. They had not accounted for the power of the truth. And they certainly had not accounted for the black press. An organization called the Pittsburgh Courier, a newspaper for the black community, got wind of the story. An unnamed Negro hero. They sent a reporter, a man named Frank Baldwin, and he began to dig. He began to ask the one question the Navy did not want to answer. What is his name? No, no, no. The Navy's expert system had survived the Japanese torpedoes, but it was about to collide with an impossible force. It could not defeat a high school dropout who had become a legend, and a press that was about to unleash a storm. The Pittsburgh Courier was not just a newspaper. It was a weapon, and it was pointed directly at the U.S. Navy's expert consensus. The Navy stonewalled. They refused to comment. They classified the reports. They hoped the story would die. But the Courier, led by its executive editor, Percal L. Pratis, would not let it go. They were joined by the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The NAACP's executive secretary, Walter White, a man who could pass for white and had used it to investigate lynchings in the South, now turned his full investigative power on the U.S. Navy. The pressure built from the press, from civil rights leaders, from senators. The story of the unnamed Negro hero was becoming a national embarrassment. The experts in Washington had a war to fight. They did not have time for a social problem. But the story was now too big to bury. The Navy's expert system, built on a century of prejudice, could not hold. It had survived the Japanese torpedoes. It could not survive the truth. On March 14, 1942, 3 months after the attack, the Navy finally surrendered. They released the name Doris Dory Miller, mess attendant, 3rd class. The story exploded. In the black community, Dory Miller became a legend, a folk hero. He was a real-life John Henry, a man of impossible strength who had fought the machine. He was the man who proved that they were not just fit to serve, they were fit to fight. The Navy, now facing a public relations tidal wave, had to make a second, even more impossible decision. The experts in Washington, the politicians, had failed, so the experts in the field took over. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the new commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, the man who had replaced the failed command. Nimitz was not a politician. He was a warrior, and he knew a hero when he saw one. On May 27th, 9:42, the location, the flight deck of the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise. The context. This was not just a ceremony. The Enterprise was just days away from sailing into the most critical naval battle in history, the Battle of Midway. The ship was a hornet's nest of activity. Pilots were being briefed, engines were being tuned. The war, the real war, was hanging on a thread. And in the middle of this high-stakes pre-battle tension, Admiral Nimitz paused the war. He held a ceremony and he called forward Mess Attendant Dory Miller. The press was invited. The cameras were rolling. This was the Navy's expert surrender. Nimitz, the most powerful admiral in the Pacific, stood in front of the two-year-old cook, and he personally pinned the Navy Cross on Miller's chest. Let's be absolutely clear about what the Navy Cross is. It is the second highest decoration for valor in the United States Navy, second only to the Medal of Honor. It is given for extraordinary heroism in combat, and on that day, it was the first Navy Cross awarded for heroism in World War II. Awarded to a cook, awarded to a black man. By the Commander-in-Chief himself, the citation read, "For distinguished devotion to duty, extraordinary courage, and disregard for his own personal safety." In one moment, Admiral Nimitz, a man who understood the system, had shattered it. He had officially and publicly declared that the Forbidden Act was an act of extraordinary heroism, but the story does not end there. Dory Miller was now the most famous black man in America. He was a superstar. The experts in Washington, the ones who had tried to bury him, now saw his value. He was pulled from sea duty. He was sent home to America, and he was sent on a war bond tour. This was the Navy's expert consensus in action again. They had a problem. Black American morale was at an all-time low. Why, they asked, should we fight for a country that treats us as second-class citizens? Why should we buy bonds for a navy that will only let us be valet? The experts needed a symbol, and Dory Miller was the perfect symbol. He was put on posters. He was paraded through cities, New York, Chicago, his home in Waco, Texas. He gave speeches encouraging Black Americans to buy war bonds, to enlist in a navy that would still only let them be cooks. This was the tragic irony. Dory Miller was a national hero who held the Navy Cross, and he was still a mess attendant. The experts had given him a medal, but they had not changed his job description. He was a hero in a cage. He was a warrior, forced once again to be a symbol, but his forbidden act had done something the experts could never take back. Because of the Dory Miller effect, because of the massive public pressure he had created, the Navy in that same year, 1942, finally opened up other ratings. For the first time, Black sailors were allowed to train as gunners, as mechanics, as radio men. Dory Miller, the cook, had not just fired a gun, he had fired the bullet that began the end of segregation in the U.S. Navy. That was his true, impossible legacy. Miller hated the war bond tour. He was not a politician. He was not a symbol. He was a sailor. He was a warrior. And his friends, his shipmates, were still out there fighting. He requested, he demanded, to be sent back to sea, to return to the war. In 1943, the experts finally agreed. His value as a symbol was fading. The war needed fighters. He was assigned to a new ship. This was not a mighty battleship. This was a baby flat-top, an escort carrier called the USS Liscum Bay. These ships were the workhorses of the Pacific. They were small, fast, and as it turned out, critically vulnerable. They were built on merchant ship hulls. They were not armored like a battleship. They were, in effect, floating fuel tanks carrying bombs. Dory Miller was by now a celebrity among the new crew. He had been promoted. He was now cook third class. His battle station was in the magazine. He was once again the man passing ammunition to the gunners, the job he had been trying to get to at Pearl Harbor. In November 1943, the Liscum Bay was in the Gilbert Islands supporting the brutal, bloody invasion of Tarawa. This was Operation Galvanic. The Liscum Bay's job was to provide air cover for the Marines dying on the beaches. It was a high-stakes, high-danger mission. The ship was part of a task group surrounded by destroyers. The expert consensus was that they were safe, protected, but the experts had once again failed to account for the enemy. 4:30 a.m., November 24th, 1943, Thanksgiving Day. It is pitch black. The sea is calm. A single Japanese submarine, the I-75, is hunting. The I-175 is a state-of-the-art fleet submarine. Its commander, Tadashi Inada, is an experienced, patient killer. For hours, he has been stalking the American task force. He penetrates the destroyer screen, an impossible feat. He is now inside the protective ring of warships. He raises his periscope, and he sees a perfect target. The silhouette of an aircraft carrier against the pre-dawn light. The USS Liscum Bay. Commander Inada does not fire one torpedo. He fires a spread. 4 Type 95 torpedoes. The deadly oxygen-fueled long lance variants leap from their tubes and race toward the carrier. They are silent. They are wakeless. Aboard the Liscum Bay, the klaxon for general quarters has just sounded. Not because of the torpedoes, but because it's 5:55 a.m. Time for the dawn patrol. Planes are being armed on the flight deck. Bombs are being moved. Fuel lines are running. The ship is in this exact moment a 10,000-ton bomb. Dory Miller is at his post, deep inside the ship, in the magazine, surrounded by explosives. 5:13 a.m. A lookout on the battleship USS New Mexico sees a flicker, a shadow in the water. He screams, "Torpedo wake!" But it's not for his ship. It's for the Liscum Bay. A single torpedo, one of the 4, slams into the Liscum Bay's starboard side, just behind the engine room. It hits the one place that guarantees death, the aircraft bomb magazine, the exact place where Dory Miller is stationed. The impossible happened again. The Liscombe Bay did not sink, it evaporated. The ship did not have time to burn. The entire 10,000-ton vessel detonated in a single catastrophic blinding fireball. A column of fire, smoke, and steel shot 1,000 FT into the air. The explosion was so violent that men on ships miles away were knocked off their feet. It rained debris and men. Down on the decks of the USS New Mexico, a battleship 5,000 yards away. The ship's own task force commander, Admiral Slew McCain, was rocked so hard he thought his ship had been hit. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing, just a hole in the ocean. The Liscombe Bay was gone. It had been blown into a million pieces. It took 23 minutes for the last burning fragment of the stern to disappear beneath the waves. 644 sailors gone in an instant, including the ship's heavyweight boxing champion, the hero of Pearl Harbor, the man who was only fit to serve coffee. Dory Miller was killed in action. His body was never found after the war. The experts, the admirals, the historians had to write the story of the U.S. Navy, and they could no longer erase the cook. His forbidden act was now a permanent part of history. In 1973, the United States Navy commissioned a new warship, a 4,100-ton frigate. They could have named it after any admiral, any expert. Instead, they named it the USS Miller, a ship of war named for the man who was once forbidden from even touching a gun. And the expert consensus finally completely broke. In 2001, the Navy commissioned the USS Dory Miller, a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship. In 2020, the Navy announced the ultimate impossible act, the next Gerald R. Ford class, the most powerful, most advanced, most expensive ship in human history. A 13 billion nuclear-powered supercarrier will be named the USS Dory Miller, the first supercarrier in history to be named for an enlisted sailor, the first to be named for a Black American. Thomas Lawson, the cook from our last story, had an insane idea that solved an impossible engineering problem. He saved 200 men. Dory Miller had a forbidden act. He did not solve an engineering problem. He solved a human one. He proved to a nation and to the world that the expert consensus was wrong. He proved that courage does not care about your rank. It does not care about your training. And it certainly does not care about the color of your skin. Sometimes the difference between defeat and victory is not a new technology. It's one person. Noticing what the experts missed and having the courage to do the one thing that everyone else said was forbidden. This isn't just a story from World War II. It's a story about challenging the system. Let us know in the comments, what was Dory Miller's most impossible act? Manning the gun or breaking the system that tried to stop him? Your opinions are critical to this channel. If you enjoyed this piece of hidden history, do us a favor and hit that like button. And for more forbidden stories that the experts tried to bury, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. In our next video, we will uncover the ghost army that fooled Hitler in broad daylight.